Hello, my name is Edwin Luskin, and welcome to Plants, Episode 3, Season 1. This is the first of 6 back-to-back sessions, bringing together a wide range of top-level expertise on a variety of critical subjects and inquiries in processing and extraction. Today, our guest is an ally to the entire network, whose resources and community building have directly impacted thousands of businesses and helped enthusiasts and professionals alike to become better at their craft. Dustin Powers of Future 4200, founder of the Good Life Gang. Today's topics include membrane technology, market trends, how to address oversupply, how to encourage collaboration and innovation, how farmers and processors can work together to better stabilize the market, new products coming to market in the future, solvent shortages, the Future 4200 forum, and much more. Next week, we will have Link Schumacher, owner of Biosystems Engineering and PE, who will get into the nitty-gritty needs for engineering a successful extraction plant. Our host today is SciPhy CEO Emmett McGregor. Emmett has invested his career in bringing hemp extraction into the future. As an operator, he has enjoyed leading teams in various disciplines to create new answers to emerging questions within the industry. Currently at the helm of SciPhy Systems, he leads our team of career professionals to develop and implement new extraction and processing technology. Today, we absolutely recommend asking questions in the chat box of the Q&A module. Dustin and Emmett will have a chance to answer them. Without further introductions, I would like to turn things over to our guest and host. Thank you for coming.
Really excited to have you on, and also, thanks for joining us and being willing to share some of your experiences today, Dustin.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I look forward to it. We've kind of known each other for a long time now. Same with your partner. I think even early on, before I had any kind of Instagram notoriety, we had crossed paths several times. So I'm glad that we were able to connect like this and talk. Yeah,
absolutely. I know that John Mark, my business partner, technical director over here, had a conversation with you about the potential of, forum or some kind of how do we share information. The old guard forums had sort of gotten disrupted by various events. So opening up a new platform, and I just got to say the feature set that you've implemented is really top notch. I mean, it's really a high performance forum, and really been innovative, not only in the content, but also in how it's been presented. So props to you.
Yeah, and I really have to defer 100% of that out to my technical guy, Sidco, on the forum. He's really the mastermind behind all of it. I wouldn't have any kind of internet presence beyond Instagram if it wasn't for him. I'm not technically savvy enough to build a website or to integrate a forum. And we use like an off-the-shelf forum platform. So that helped a lot, but he's the one that said, this is exactly why we need to use this platform, and this is how we're going to build it, because it's going to enable this user moderation, blah, blah, blah. He could go into the details on the tech side, and he might be down, but he probably won't get them on video. He's not that kind of guy, but yeah, I defer everything out to Sidco.
Similarly with John Mark over here, video shy, but the one with the ears and eyes on the trends in the market and always contacting the various wizards and experts out there, getting new and exciting information. One thing I think we were talking about before we jumped on that I'd love to open it up with is your thoughts on solvents. Just over the past week or so, we've been having some conversations with clients that are starting to have some trouble with their existing suppliers in terms of getting consistent and low-cost supply of 190 proof ethanol. That was kind of surprising to me. I thought that all this hype about, medical use of ethanol, that it would still be a drop in the bucket because of how much supply is out there in the world. But talking to some of our suppliers, I think we have seen prices start to creep up and lead times on ethanol creep up. You seeing anything like that out there in the market, or are you working with any ethanol companies you have some insight on?
Yeah, so I am getting a lot of feedback on that side, but through a project that Link Schumacher and I are connected on. So I just want to give him a shout out. He's an awesome guy to work with, but we're working together on a project, and it's a group that had a bunch of corn ethanol plants, and they're converting one of them into hemp processing, something that's going to rival kind of what Chris, the Clear Scientist, is doing out in Darlington, kind of at that scale. Warm hexane. We can go into that in a bit, but they come from this ethanol background, and what they were doing is selling all this ethanol for fuel. So as that fell apart, as the crude oil price dropped off, it's not like they just went out of business. These guys are huge and they had a lot of money and they're running like high profit businesses. They're perfectly fine to weather the storm. So what they said, and it's not that the ethanol wasn't there, is that there was supply chain issues. Before this, they would only sell a train car. They didn't care about selling it to the little guys. If you weren't buying train cars at a time, you were a little guy, they didn't care about you. But those train car clients dried up. So you're still making all this ethanol and people still want ethanol. They just don't want that much of it. What do? Well, you go buy a bunch of IBCs and you start selling IBCs full of ethanol. So you were saying $10. Their spot buy price for between 0 and 50,000 gallons is $4.50 a gallon.
Is that before or after proof tax?
Gotta imagine that's before.
Yeah, I would think so. But even so, I mean, I've seen recently talking about drum prices where the per gallon price was, I mean, approaching $20. That just seems outrageous to me. And and like you said, it's not really a supply side issue necessarily, although we do recommend that the ethanol is certified for, a high grade of purity. You don't want to just get any biofuels ethanol off the shelf and expect it to be, to have been transported and be compatible with GMP and that type of thing. But that said, there's so much ethanol being produced. I mean, millions and millions of gallons that, but how do you get it to the client, right? And who is brokering the middle of those deals and breaking off a train car into smaller units? That's really the question.
So I passed that connection on to most of my solvent suppliers that I'm working with, like all of the Good Life Gang affiliated solvent suppliers have gotten access to this supplier, and hopefully they're doing it. They should be able to break this off and then be able to supply, to keep those prices of ethanol where we need them to be, not as underwater as a hemp processor. I won't say profitable.
Right. Well, it brings us to an interesting question because, you mentioned you got a big project and these folks are producing ethanol as a business. But I wonder when they're at that large scale, if they're using ethanol as their solvent, is that, what do you see as the solvents of the future? Where's the industry headed and why?
So what's crazy about that project is because they're attached to those ethanol plants, they have unlimited free use of ethanol. And what they would have done, taken the ethanol clean, extracted with it, and then recovered the ethanol, and it would still be terped up, kind of nasty, second use ethanol, fine for extracting at least once, maybe twice more, whatever, before it needs to be reproofed. They just send that right back to the plant, gets mixed into the 1 million gallon stream or whatever and cooked off in the giant distillation. So no problem. So they literally have free ethanol and they still chose to do room temperature hexane extraction.
There you go. I mean, it just shows you that trends aren't always reliable, right? I mean, you see hexane being so common in food oil manufacturing, corn oil, soy oil. We've seen wheat germ plants that are turning over. So there's a lot of conversions going on of big factories into hemp extraction plants, and they're able to bring on big capacity quickly. But what is it that really gives an advantage to hexane? Like, is it just the solvent-based cost? I think that can't be it, right? So where are the technical advantages?
It's twofold. First of all, it's in the limited extraction of lipids with an ambient extraction, which reduces the chilling costs needed if you're going to run ethanol or the mixture of another solvent. See, now if you start talking about methanol, you're going down a different path because room temperature winterization with methanol kind of makes more sense. But and then number two is recovery costs. It's much cheaper to recover hexane, to cook it off and recondense it, than it is ethanol, the latent heat and whatnot. So, but let's dial this back. Why did we even start using ethanol? I feel like I'm to blame for a lot of it. People just kind of followed me. I was just a guy, and I had access to a bunch of ethanol. Hexane was scary. I'm not a fucking scientist, and I got buckets and ethanol. I probably can't die doing that, right? Like, I've been drinking this at college. We're fine. And so we just scaled that up and ran with it. And the regulators kind of looked at it the same way. Oh, ethanol is kind of safe. We deal with ethanol, but hexane, ooh, scary, right? Right. And it's true. It's easier to die with hexane than it is ethanol, right? So, But at large scale, industrial scale, I don't give a fuck about all that. We got engineers for that. We got people that went to school for this. We got it figured out how to be safe with hexane. Okay, do that, and then it's way cheaper. Great. So
Right.
yeah, that's just the nature of who was doing what they were doing in the industry when it was still illegal. It was a bunch of yokels like me, like no education, nothing. Like I see all these other guys dying with hydrocarbons. I don't want to be one of them. So how can I scale this up with something that's liquid? And ethanol just was the best choice at the time. And there's some other benefits, but almost all the benefits to using ethanol are that it's safe and okay to use at home, basically.
Yeah, I mean, basically, it's not as explosive as some solvents. If there is an accident, if there is a flammability issue, it's not going to have quite as much of a boom, shall we say.
Yeah, that's the main one. It's not as explosive, or it's not explosive. It's still flammable. It'll catch on fire.
Right. And then on the flip side, when it first got adopted, a little bit less now, but the thought was, well, if there's some trace ethanol in the product when you send it out, wholesale or put it into another product, well, it's already approved for human consumption in terms of alcoholic beverages. You see it in tinctures on the medicinal botanical side. So it's already, grass. It's acceptable to have in the product. So
Sure.
You don't have that concern with leaving trace solvent. But that said, now, we're seeing when you go to market, some states at least, and potentially federal, that when you go to sell that wholesale ingredient, you're going to have to hit a, maybe 5,000 ppm limit or something like that. So you still have to be concerned about your levels. And to us, we've sort of looked at this. We've kind of we sell ethanol equipment because that's what people demand. Certain jurisdictions, especially jurisdictions I've noticed that don't have existing chemical plants and have never dealt with permitting chemical manufacturing or even large food manufacturing previously, they seem to think, oh, ethanol, that's safe. I can understand it. It's not, it appears to them to be more regulatorily compliant. But when you look at broad industry, especially at anything of scale, but even on small scale production of medicinal herb products and things like that, you see the use of things like, ether, very commonly in these small production facilities, and ether is way more dangerous, than hexane, right?
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see that that's the flip. And when you see big engineers coming to the table and just saying, why are you dealing with all these problems with hexane? Not with hexane, with ethanol. Why not go towards hexane? Or consider other heavy hydrocarbons. We're seeing some people talk about maybe heptane could be an option. Less so pentane doesn't seem to be very popular as a primary.
Here's the deal. The reason that hexane is being used and the reason that it's going to beat out everything else is because, like you said, they've already done it. And people are just repurposing large-scale hexane facilities that were doing some other obsolete plant oil. Like Chris's was a cottonseed oil plant that had been defunct for years. He scrapped like half of what was there, used it to pay for the upgrades he needed to get the whole plant up and running. And now he's making more CBD hash oil than anybody. So,
yeah. What do you think about quality? Do you think those retrofit plants are able to compete on quality?
So we're talking about CBD here, right? So basically nobody's screwing with CBD crude, although there is a group over there remediating it. And so there's something there to the medicinal aspect of a broad spectrum CBD crude. But until the government gets its head out of its ass, so probably never, most people are going to be making isolate, and a decent amount of people are going to be making tea-free CBD. At those points in the process, it's just, how clean is your food, right? Like if that was certified for your cottonseed oil and most of the CBD is being consumed as food or as an edible, it doesn't matter at that point in the process. If it's been distilled, especially if it's been crystallized, I don't care what happened down, as long as there's not heavy metals in it. So, and let's clarify, at bulk scale CBD hemp for isolate for N-cannabinoids, I don't care. We're not talking about like quality craft THC. I wouldn't touch quality craft THC with ethanol or hexane. I'm gonna hit it with some like propane, probably super cold. I'm after the terps. We're not talking about the terps here. If we are, we're going to pull them up front and then we'll reintroduce them later, because that whole process is, as you know, is going to destroy any of the terps involved. So we're just focused on a couple cannabinoids at that point, especially if it's going to go through chroma to remediate, then you're really just dealing with, refined cannabinoids. And I don't really care that much about, and yeah, like Chris bought a train car worth of hexane and ran it through his system to clean the thing. That's the CIP on that giant facility. Just if the train car pulls up, you attach the top and it just cycles through and distills and goes back into an empty train car. Okay, we're clean. Like the system's designed to be clean.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we haven't really seen the grading come into the market yet. That's where I think that there is potential for craft hemp extract. And I say that very specifically, hemp extract, right? And there's so much uncertainty in the market right now. We think that CBD, dietary ingredient, meaning isolate form, distillate form, stuff that's over 80%, over 70% even, cannabinoids is going to be, in the end, allowable by the FDA to go into food products, or at minimum cosmetics, which might make up an increasingly large portion of the overall market as we go to international markets. But in the end, there's a big question. I don't know if you've talked to attorneys like 3 years ago, 2 years ago, even pretty recently. I was hearing some attorneys saying, and specifically our attorney, Rod Kite, who we're going to have on the program in a few weeks, saying that there's a chance, it seems less likely now than it did back then, but there's a chance that for dietary hemp oil, at least, they might end up limiting it to a 60% purity cannabinoid broad spectrum hemp extract because of the Epidiolex and Sativex clinical trials that went through where, CBD is considered a pharmaceutical. So obviously we're hoping out here that the legislature intervenes and just directly makes it straightforward that CBD is allowable as a dietary ingredient, or that the FDA, after their extensive and laborious back and forth process, finally comes out with a ruling that yes, CBD is going to be allowable, considered grass, considered allowable in food products, or at minimum allowable in nutritional supplement products. But you never know, right?
Man, how fucking stupid. Hey, hemp's legal, but you can only smoke it.
Yeah, right.
Oh, what the fuck?
Yeah, that's funny. I mean, if let me ask you this: if there was a hemp extract product on the market that was as flavorful as a cannabis extract, like a wax or shatter that you see on the recreational THC markets, do you think that's a viable product? Do you think that there are people out there that would enjoy that and would actually dab it?
Have you not had any fresh frozen, like indoor hemp flower, like CRC stuff?
Oh, I have.
Yeah, dude, there's some good, I've had some good hemp extracts, but they have THC in them. They have, like the few percent of THC in them.
Yeah. I mean, I have. And in fact, we've been doing some tests and experiments in the background. We kind of like, this is, here first, we kind of like the idea of propane extraction of hemp specifically for that craft market. And potentially even skipping distillation, skipping some of those high temp processes. And it can taste good. It can be a good experience. The question about will it ever be low enough THC to go to broad market is an interesting one. That sort of takes us into the agricultural sector, which I know you work on that side as well. Do you think that these seed companies coming out and saying they've got certified, insurable, THC-free hemp seeds are legitimate? Do you think that it's a real thing? We're going to see THC-free hemp crops in the fields in the next couple of years?
I know that Oregon CBD, the Crawford brothers have worked on, their CBG lines are THC-free because they lack the synthase. But I don't know enough about it at all to talk on whether or not you can get to THC-free CBD down the same path. I don't think so. I'm pretty sure the synthase branch off early and then go in the same direction. So you can't, if you eliminate one, like their CBG doesn't make CBD either because the synthase is the same basal one. So I don't know. And I would like to see that contract. Is it we guarantee it if you pull it 3 weeks early, then sure, yeah, I'll guarantee that too. Like the THC definitely doesn't come to, the most important last couple weeks, which doesn't do me any good.
I don't know. I've always sort of secretly suspected that the secret to craft is going to be pulling it early, keeping the THC low, finding a plant that produces enough terpenes early in the cycle to have a good head on it, and then extracting from that. I don't see that many people doing it because you're going to sacrifice bulk, biomass bulk on that. But if it's all in-house, maybe that makes sense for a portion or for a specialty crop.
Yeah, but on the back end, we've made a lot of progress on what you can do when you have THC, and if you can introduce a fast acting catalyst, basically, especially if you can introduce it, say, in like a CRC column, if it's at the top of the CRC column and you're pushing through with propane, and if any THC that happens to hit this catalyst becomes a legal cannabinoid, then it doesn't matter anymore.
Right. Yeah, that's the other interesting question that I think that we're all waiting on bated breath to hear back is, there's so much vagary in the controlled substances, regulations about, analogs and what's an analog, what's not an analog. Some of these compounds like, say, Delta 8 or other forms that are not a Delta 9 THC are not a THCA product either.
Oh yeah, just look at CBG.
Yeah.
Like, okay, so I'm growing a plant that has no CBD or THC. Do I need to follow any of the rules?
Right, exactly. and if you extract it, it doesn't have a high THC spike in it. But by some miracle, it happens to have some effects on you if you consume it. What are the implications of that?
Yeah. Well, okay. What are the other 30% or whatever active ingredients that are unidentified? Even when we take, and you can say the same thing about any distillate. Any distillate that's floating at like 70% and the rest of the graph is just a bunch of unknowns. If they say 80% total active cannabinoids, it's like, okay, well, I know 20% of this is not color compounds and other shit. Like, you can have some of the best looking. So I usually I'm going to see a Delta 10 peak. That's where most of it is. But there's still like often 5-10% other mysteries in there. What the hell are those? We're just smoking those, so it doesn't even matter. So,
right. Yeah. And for those of us come into the program that may not have as much background in the cannabinoid space, what we're talking about is that, cannabinoids very, very similar to each other, different as far as an isomer form, different where one double bond is, maybe a different functional group here and there. The cannabis plant produces, at least dozens of different cannabinoids in it. And some of them are just poorly characterized. I mean, we're seeing year on year newly characterized cannabinoids, or at least cannabinoids that were previously known but had never actually been detected in a high percentage in a cannabinoid plant being determined to be in the plant. Delta 10 is one of those compounds that apparently is actually relatively prevalent, although it was never before known, mainly because the analytical labs don't have the capability, don't have the standards to test for it efficiently, right? Do you think that they're going to start actually picking those up and having to test for those minor cannabinoids as part of regulatory testing, or is it going to remain this mystery?
I don't think have to. And we as an industry force the Delta 10 thing. And these are kind of like chicken and the egg scenarios. Like, if you'd never had enough Delta 10 before to isolate it, how do you build a standard? And then once you all of a sudden have it, you go backwards, you isolate it, and then run it through NMR, and you pay a bunch of money for a bunch of testing. And you have a lot of smart people like Alex Siegel who do their own scientific, basically research and put it into a paper form and present it all over the country at different conferences. And finally, we come to this conclusion that, yes, this is definitely Delta 10. It's not CBC. We start introducing standards to the labs, and now all of a sudden there's a bunch of labs throughout California and Oregon that'll test for Delta 10 because they've got the standards. That all came of people growing outdoor weed in California and their crops getting exposed to Phos-Chek, which is the powder that they spray from the aerial firefighting planes. And that phosphorus acts as a catalyst on Delta 9 or CBD to convert it into, it's just Delta 9. You got to get to Delta 9 first from CD. So converts that Delta 9 into Delta 10. It shifts it over. So, and that's what we're talking about with hemp. If you introduce some sort of other compound, it may have a chemical reaction on the cannabinoids, ideally more on the delta or on the THC than the CBD. And then that can leave us with a product that still has a bunch of its CBD, but now no longer has THC delta 9, but it may have THC delta 10 or THC delta 8, which are non-controlled substances. If you can prove that it came from CBD, which the regulators, again, the government's head so far up its ass, it doesn't even know what it's talking about. It doesn't even know about what these random words are. All these damn stoners keep coming up with new stupid ideas and trying to get around the rules. We don't even know what they're talking about.
Yeah, ignore the Israeli academia. Just to keep ignoring it, right?
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's man, that example in particular leads to a lot of questions, right? We're going into mass agriculture. We're going into thousands of acres hemp plantations, both domestic and we're hearing increasingly international plantings. Who knows what they're going to be exposed to out there in these broad fields, what's already in the field, what might get accidental carryover. Do you think there's a chance that there's going to be, ongoing additional new compounds that are going to emerge in the plant just due to secondary exposure? Is there anybody intentionally even introducing those compounds to their fields to try and mess with their cannabinoid balance in the field? You hear about that at all?
Not that I know of, but I know a lot of farmers at the end of last year were looking at the state of the market thinking like, damn, I wish I had some magic bullet right now. And that might have been the move, like start a little fire nearby and get them to spray near you. Get the government to pay for your conversion.
Yeah, you got to get it out. That's the problem. You're going to take it to market. Eventually, they're going to figure it out. And, that's unclear if that's safe, although I guess it's safe enough to spread it all around everywhere, putting out fires. So you hope it's safe enough to inhale. But yeah. I digress, right?
Yeah. Well, and that brings up a question about the safety of the converted cannabinoids as well, because a lot of the literature shows that quite a few of the synthetic cannabinoids or these converted cannabinoids are extremely toxic. Like, will kill you dead if you smoke them. So that's the risk you play when you convert your whole field is who's the guinea pig. And if he dies, then we're screwed because we just wasted a whole field and dude's dead. But
right.
Yeah. So there's risk there. And that was a big debate when Chris came out with that HHCA the first time too, the hydrogenated cannabinoids. It was kind of questionable. And he's of the mindset, which I pretty much am too, is that you get fairly confident in a compound that you make and then you smoke it. and that's what he did. And he said, I'm still alive, and passed it out to 3 or 4 more people that trusted him and said, look, I smoked it. I'm alive. I've been smoking it. You want to try it? And they did. And then they passed it on. And all of a sudden we're at BizCon and there's HHCA everywhere. And people are getting high on HHCA. Now, we don't know the long-term effects of that. If it turns out that everybody in 10 years gets leukemia from that shit, well, that sucks. But, that's kind of life, right? You can try to control and study everything, but humans just kind of stumble through and discover things. And a lot of times, like cigarettes retroactively are like, well, shit, that was a bad idea. Doesn't stop everybody from smoking cigarettes. So whatever. Right.
Yeah. And that's it. When it comes down to it, the closer to nature you are, the closer you are to the hemp plant and what the hemp plant has in it in the proportions that the hemp plant has in it, the less likely it is to be lethal. Right.
Well, yeah, because we've been doing that for a lot longer.
Right, exactly. It's kind of like it's gotten bred out. Probably there might have been toxic stuff in it at one point, but humanity and hemp have had a long relationship, right? So they've bred out what's toxic to humans.
Well, yeah, but on a counterpoint is like wheat. We've bred wheat for certain favorable factors, like the way it grows and the way it finishes and the yields, while disregarding some of the anti-nutrients that it produces, like gluten and gliadin and these proteins that are relatively toxic to people. Now, it's good if you want really spongy dough, but it's bad if you got IBS. And we kind of just like, because we weren't really looking at that, we accidentally bred it way higher than it was before. So there, it's like you could have this argument with the terpenes in cannabis. Terpenes are not safe in concentrated volumes. Like if you just smoke straight terpenes, you're gonna have a bad time. If you drink them, you get them in your eyeball, all bad. So you start bringing up the question, and like you said, the further away you get. So now you got people with like 30% terpene extracts, and then you got people putting it on a red hot nail. Again, this is something that people haven't been doing for thousands of years. This is a relatively new thing, or they did it a long time ago and we forgot about it. But as far as we can tell, in recorded history. We don't have any recorded history of people fractionally, molecularly distilling cannabinoids, or even just like propane extracting and getting this terpene content, this liquid terpene content that you can dab on a hot nail. That's kind of new.
I would say people have been breathing in essential oils for an awful long time, but then again, not all essential oils are safe either. So, yeah.
And usually they weren't like tossing it on a red hot rock and puffing it. They're a little smarter than that. We'll put it over here on the diffuser and slowly steam it up into the air. That's fine. Not just railing it. Like that's a whole different game. 700 degrees to the dome.
I know some people that are fantasizing about the day where they can just have a diffuser or just pumping out sauce into the room.
So, dude, I get sent so many terps. That's what we do with most of them. It's just diffuse them out, or I'll add it to the girl's little like candle scentsy thing, and it just comes out. Like, what else are you gonna do with all these fucking terps?
Nice. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's interesting. Some unexpected products that you're making yourself. I mean, I've heard of terp candles before. Do you see anything on the forum or just out there in life that sort of surprised you? New products coming out of the hemp space or cannabis space for that matter?
I'm kind of surprised at the lack of that. I see a lot of people composting hemp biomass. I've seen some biochar processes, which is all absurd because hemp fiber can make some of the strongest and highest value graphene. And graphene is a super high value product. And it's just like apparently some of the best graphene on earth comes from hemp waste, which is absurd that they still call it waste. People still pay to get rid of their hemp waste when it's easily convertible into one of the most valuable forms of a very valuable element. That's mind-blowing. But it's this lack of diversity. All these guys are growing hemp for CBD, which is like, God damn, that's if every single other person's doing the same thing, you're doing the wrong thing. Like, good luck. I honestly hope that there'd be a shit ton more seeds, but people have rallied so hard against the natural growth of hemp. They don't want male plants. You can't grow seed crops. It's like they're doing this up in Canada and it's not cross-pollinating everything else that they're growing. Like I'd really like to see someone grow a shit ton of seeded hemp and then finish pigs on them. And I'd pay a premium for that pig.
I've heard that. I've heard that that hemp as pig feed and both seed and stalk and leaves actually improves the quality. Not only pigs, but maybe also beef.
Not so much the beef. Certainly not the seed for the beef. The greenery before it starts putting off cannabinoids is okay. Cows are such highly adapted animals to grazing on grass and grassland crops specifically. They'll browse on some other things. Every now and then they'll eat some blackberry leaves. If I force them to, they'll eat things that they wouldn't normally eat. But that, like, if given the choice, they'll eat grass every time over shrubbery. They will eat spruce tips for whatever reason. But whereas a pig is much more adapted to eating whatever the fuck, kind of like a dog. Pigs, dogs, bears, humans. We're very omnivorous. Cows are like obligate grass eaters.
Right. Yeah. And how many head do you own? I know you got some cows out there on the farm.
Yeah, we have 9 that we're managing right now. We've butchered 3 this year already and then had 3 new babies and then 2 more of them are pregnant right now. So I'll have 11 here pretty soon. But we've been breeding the herd into much smaller animals. So we got Dexter involved. So my prize bull right now, I don't think he's going to get much taller. He keeps getting fatter and fatter, but he's like somewhere between knee and waist high. Like, so he's like, we've had a big pig on the farm that was about the same size as him right now. And he's just, and the idea it being multiple fold, but first of all, a cow spends all day long bent over chewing on grass. Like that's their job. So the closer it is to the ground, the less grass it has to chew, or the less distance it has to bend over to chew the grass. But the government regulates direct sale of beef to shareholders by limiting the size of the share. Like I can't sell any less than a 1/8 share of a cow. So 1/8 of a 1,000-pound cow is much more than 1/8 of a 500-pound cow or a 400-pound cow. I figure 1/8 of a 400-pound cow might fit in the average yuppie's freezer. So that opens up my market to all these people that, the smaller your freezer, the more you're willing to pay for beef, it turns out. Like all these guys out in the country with a bunch of freezer space, they're not going to pay you a premium for beef. I'll just go to the next guy. There's so many cows out here. But city folk will see my Instagram and I'm out there hanging out with my cows. I got really nice grass. We got the whole holistic thing going on. When I can sell them, 35 to 50 pound packs that they can fit in their much smaller freezer, they'll pay a goddamn premium for it because they don't know anybody with cows. Where else are you going to get cows? There's no cows around them.
Look at that, government regulations leading to breeding that, it's maybe a little perverse in a way. It's like making these tiny cows just so that you can have a smaller share. But at the end of the day, what works, right? Given the conditions.
Yeah. This is like an established breed. I didn't make the midget cows. I just acquired some.
Right, exactly. I'm wondering what kind of similar. Actually, I guess the THC levels is really the similar effect that we're seeing in the hemp side. It's like just breeding for low THC levels, but high cannabinoid levels. We would probably have very much better producers in the CBD field right now, much more hardy plants potentially if we didn't have to be so focused on breeding out the THC. And there's some countries out there that I guess are starting to allow for higher limits. Weirdly, there's some island nations. I've heard like the Channel Islands have like a 1% level, and there's some other smaller countries out there allowing 1% or maybe even more in the hemp. Do you think that in the long run the 0.3 is going to hold up, or do you think it'll bump up? And what are the results of that on the ag and processing side?
Yeah, no way. There's a lot. Like the island nations is a really good example. There's so many island nations right now that are facing like 15 to 30 year like their land's going to be gone in 15 or 30 years, that are starting to get desperate as fuck. And why wouldn't you just grow a shit ton of weed and sell it internationally and make enough money to expatriate your people away to, we got to buy a bunch of land in Idaho. Our island's about to be gone. What are we going to do? We're going to grow cocaine and poppies and this crazy CBD THC mix weed. We got to do something. That's going to stir it all up. What the fuck else are they going to do, man? They're screwed.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. Here's a question for you. On the processing side, we are often saying that what you're putting in, your feedstock material, is so variable, and there's so many unknowns with the feedstock that you have to build your plant to be adaptable, essentially, to some extent at least. But largely that's, again, because we haven't seen regionalized varietals yet. We haven't seen varieties that can just be broad planted really confidently in a specific region with a specific wax, phospholipid, and cannabinoid content that's even across the board. Do you think that breeding is happening? Is it close now? Should people be confident in breeding, in manufacturing facilities that are more specialized, don't have quite as much adaptability looking into the next 5 years? Or is it still be ready for anything because you never quite know what's going to come in the door?
Well, at scale, the way that they're solving these problems, like Chris, is twofold. One has limited the amount of customers that he's working with. So I think he has two brokers of farmers, and that broker's job is everything that comes through that broker is then A, and everything that comes through this broker is B. So Chris has got two batches, A and B, and it's that broker's responsibility to homogenize all of that. And so when Chris gets it, it's a homogenized A, and that's going to be the next 2 or 3 months of run. And then we'll have a day of downtime cleaning, and then we'll switch to B and we'll run B for 3 months and then repeat. And so that really takes most of that out. And by flip-flopping them between two, when A is running, that gives, say B is due 20 days before we're going to start running it. That gives them a chance to run their pilot scale and see what are the parameters on this. We can run some assessment. And really where that comes down at this scale is the degumming, like you said, the phospholipids. So how much water and salt is it going to take? And then how much of our media are we going to need to use? And so that we can really refine that. So when we're running this, 100,000 gallons a day process, a difference in a few percent can add up really quickly. So we got 20 days, we run it through the pilot. We can really nail down on what the parameters are on this batch. We can make our modifications on the process. When we shut down and restart, we'll have everything set and we can run like that. So,
and what you're talking about is a degumming using essentially a liquid process plus adsorption, right? So
yeah,
that's
sure. Because
something the small scale, you're rarely ever seeing that. We're really, we're interested in bringing that to the table, but but yeah, it involves some other equipment.
So, yeah, and at industrial scale, we start, we're looking at, it's all about cost average, and it is to an extent at the bottom scale, but 1% difference is not as big a deal on the small scale as it is on the epic scale. Because if I can save, 1 to 2% of several hundred tons of media, that adds up very quickly. But yeah, because we're doing hexane extraction and we're not winterizing and it's running, it's room temp hexane. If we hit that with some salt water real quick, they don't, hexane and salt water don't mix together. Cannabinoids don't want to be in salt water. Water soluble impurities will go into the water and can be washed out simply, just basic degumming. Especially if we make that water acidic or basic and then a switch of the two. That right there will allow us to use less media. And then we can run it through just maybe through some polishing, maybe not even. These wipers, they distill all sorts of weird shit through these wipe films. So, sorry, I have the thing open on the side. When you guys put this up, will people be able to see the webinar chat as well? Is it just like a screenshot of this whole thing, or?
I think it's the video. So if you want to reference the chat, maybe read out what they say.
Yeah. So this one's relevant. It says, is hemp phospholipid different and high valued than that from soy? So the lecithin is what you would be after. And hemp lecithin is pretty valuable. And is at this scale is something that they should be saving as a valuable byproduct. Now, I brought up to my guys, same thing. I said, look, we're going to have all these weird little value adds. And they said, that's great. Where can we sell it? And I said, well, it's chicken and the egg. Nobody has it that much. You're at first to market. And they said, we're not interested in that because there's no guaranteed channel for it. So we'll save it, but we're not going to focus on that till next year. We're here to make CBD because we know that we can sell that. We already got that all contracted, sold out. That if we make CBD, like you said, then we can start thinking about that. So yeah, if you're at scale and you've got these byproducts, start saving it. Start, your biomass, smart people right now are drying out that biomass and pulping it, turning it into paper pulp, and then just storing it as dry or starting to slowly sell it out. That's a huge value add that can be done very simply. So yeah, targeting these little niche value add products. As a person that's not a giant scale processor, start looking at what these giant scale processors are calling waste, because you've got all the time and creativity in the world. So if they're paying people to get rid of those phospholipids, which are full of, high value lecithin, well, okay, so if they'll pay me to take it and then I can do my process and then sell the lecithin, that's money on both ends. That's a good business to me. That's what I would be doing. If I was chasing hemp right now, I would not be making fucking CBD. I would not be, if I was invested in I'm invested in cannabis, and it has nothing to do with processing it, right? Because that's what every motherfucker's doing. Find a niche, find something that other people aren't doing. Try doing that. That's where you're going to make money. You want to get rich in hemp, do that.
Right. And I mean, you take it from both sides, right? An established company, you have waste stream, you need to do a waste stream analysis, figure out where the value is and where the break even is for you to bring on a new process to make it a value add. On the small scale, specialization, doing it first, testing it on your process, and then find somebody that's getting rid of the waste stream. Because waste stream is one of, as I've mentioned in one of our previous presentations, is one of those costs that people don't have a good handle on when they're setting up a new hemp startup. Some of the bigger plants, they've been in operation before, they understand waste stream. It costs money to get rid of waste, or you got to find a way to make it into value stream. But right now, it's basically an untapped market. You've got all the byproducts, everything from spent media, spent solvent. You've got, as you said, gums, phospholipids that are coming from the degumming process. You've got your fats and waxes coming out of dewaxing processes. Even the pigments, potentially, the various pigmenting agents could actually be antioxidants. We need to characterize them better to understand where they might have a value in the nutritional supplements chain. So I see somebody has asked about, how many, non-cannabinoid compounds are there in the oil, or how well characterized is it? The truth is that there's so much diversity among the different varietals and the different regions right now that there are small minor constituents that absolutely have not been characterized yet. I mean, across the board, there's opportunity to try and characterize new compounds. There are some entities that might have a better grasp on the breakdown of what exactly the non-cannabinoid constituents are, but it's not necessarily very well published knowledge. Academia is kind of lagging behind in some of this, in my opinion. We don't see a lot of material science. We don't see a lot of practical process engineering publications as of yet, because the engineering academia has not come online, really. So the answer is there's a lot. I mean, hundreds, potentially even thousands of uncharacterized compounds found in this plant. They're not all going to be in one plant, right? But distributed across all the varietals that are being cultivated across the world, there's a lot to be discovered yet. And it's probably not necessarily going to be cannabinoids. It'll be phospholipids or flavonoids, flavones, all the different minor constituents that just haven't been emphasized right now.
And to Jonathan asked, does hemp lecithin's phosphatidylcholine content compete with soy or sunflowers? The problem is there's also research. We have some information on the choline contents of the hemp seed oil, but that's not the phosphatides that we're worried about in our extraction process that had no seed oil. The phosphatides and the phospholipids and a lot of this stuff comes from the resin gland that we're breaking down to target the cannabinoids inside, and then also the other random shit that's inside of that resin gland. So the cutaneous structure that makes up the outside of that resin gland breaks down into a bunch of phosphatides, and then all like the random stuff floating around in between the myceles that are in there generating, the ones that generate the alcohols that the plant uses to mix with the terpenes to make the cannabinoids, all these different organelles that are in there. They're floating around in a mixture of random shit too. So it's endless. And so on that project that I'm working with Link, there's another guy, he's an OG in the seed oil processing. And these are the first questions he had for me. He's like, what's the percentage of the phosphatide? And all these questions. I was like, dude, we don't know. You're in uncharted water here. You're going to have to do this. He's like, well, why haven't you just sent it off to here, and here? And we're like, well, because it's the first time I'm talking to you. So,
right.
We're
and honestly,
right now.
Nobody's wanted to pay for it, right?
No, nobody was at this scale. This didn't matter. Yeah. Who cares? We weren't worried about the 1% of it. We're selling hash oil. We're getting rich. We don't care about the fucking phosphatides. What are you talking about?
Yeah, but the time to start caring is now.
The 1% matters now. Like we're eking it out because again, everybody's trying to make CBD oil, and there's always a guy that's going to sell it cheaper than you. So or there's like how anybody's going to compete with these facilities that are running at this scale. It's like you wouldn't go out and try to make soybean oil in your garage right now. Why would you? You would never make any fucking money. You're just only going to lose money. Have that mindset with CBD. That's the scale that we're at immediately. Like we're there. We've been there. We were there last year. We're going to be there times 10 this year.
And the only exception I would say is if you have a guaranteed buyer of the end consumer product, right? If you've still got some Chad on the line, by all means, don't listen to me. I'm talking about I'm going to jump into the hemp industry and I could just spend a couple $100,000 and I'll have a nice lab and I can make hemp oil and I'll make money. Unless you got that Chad on the line down the road, you are the Chad and do not be the Chad. Like I said, find a niche, pick these, if you're going to spend that money to develop lecithin or even hemp-based ethanol, and then just flip that back to the processors so that they have this now their CBD product was 100% hemp derived. I extracted it with hemp ethanol, and then I made it into a nano size with this hemp lecithin, and then now I've got this hemp ethanol, hemp, whatever the fuck, all hemp. Yeah, that's heady. I grew it in hemp compost. Sure, great. Like 100% hemp. Yeah, I'm sure someone will pay a premium for that. Great. Now they've got a niche. You got a niche. You got an own little ecosystem working there. That's great. That's a much better model than I'm going to go make isolate. And it's a good reality check. I mean, we see, project budgets you really starting at 1.5 million, reasonably. Even that is probably low when you take real estate into concern and working capital. I mean, this is a multi-million-dollar startup business at this point for sure. So keep that in mind. That said, there's always exceptions to every rule. It's all about finding that niche that's going to work for you, right? Something that I'm curious about as we see this consolidation scale up. I know that that you're into permaculture to some extent, into thoughts about sustainability, ecosystem development. You built a community in terms of Future 4200, also Good Life Gang. Do you think that it's possible to build actual co-ops that can have buying power from the farmer side to start to consolidate processing power, or is the time come and gone where that opportunity is here? Because I know that there's some examples like White Buffalo that say that they're a co-op, but really they're a private company that owns the core infrastructure, and then they've gone and signed up subscribers that are farmers, right? But a traditional co-op would be farmers coming together, pooling money to buy a new or an old processing plant. They own it, they share all profits out of it, and they get a guaranteed processing throughput per season, right? Is that a viable model? Have we seen that anywhere?
Yeah, I mean, in all of other agriculture, right? So it must be that,
right?
It must be. I think it's just because we're riding on the coattails of hemp being a value, like this high value crop, which is quickly not becoming, although it still is compared to other ones, but not for long. Like just basic supply and demand economics, that this is going to get to a point where if you want to keep growing hemp, you're going to need to be regionally attached to some sort of co-op like that. It makes the most sense. But at the same time, if you don't do that, you end up like the beef producers, and you're at the mercy of the processors, and the processors can just fuck you anytime they want. And that is a borderline cartel level corporation. And that's the alternative to, you got like a co-op, and you got kind of a cartel where the cartel is, holds you by the toes. The co-op puts the power in the farmer's hands, and the cartel puts the power in the people with enough money to build the processing facilities on their own. And that's where we're going right now. All these little guys just went at it by themselves and said, I'll be the biggest guy. No, I'll be the biggest guy. And it's like, okay, you paved the way for the real whales, and here they are shitting on top of you because they can process more in a day than all of you guys could last year combined. So, and they were smart about it, like Chris. So it didn't cost them a bunch of money to get it done. It was, you just went and repurposed something that already existed and just completely turned the fire hose of CBD crude on. Good luck. So I think the only, and then what happens is when farmers like Chris, or not farmers, but processors like Chris, just by the inherent nature of that facility, say, look, we can only afford to fuck with, these two giant scale, like the 4 or 5 farmers that are incorporated in that are growing ungodly amount of hemp, like just the most insane amount. So if you want to grow 1,000 acres of hemp, 2,000 acres of hemp and be competitive, your only hope is to co-op with other farmers around you. And ideally you guys co-op and invest into your own extraction facility that you cooperatively own. Now, getting together and then selling as a bulk will definitely give you power, sellers, selling power. But if you don't maintain ownership of the processing facility, you're at the mercy of the processor.
Yeah, I mean, I see a few opportunities for the farmers out there. One is, like you said, build your own processing plant. That's obvious. Now, the thought is what's in between the field and the processing plant. Obviously, you got to be able to harvest it, dry it, store it, get it to processing, unless you're harvesting it and going straight wet into your process, right?
That's the hidden secret of hexane, is that you can just hit it. You just toss the wet material in there and extract it wet. No big deal. It comes out a little darker. But if we're going to distillate, if we're going to isolate, does not matter. If we're going to distillate, it's fixable, and it's way cheaper than investing in drying facilities and everything that's involved in drying. Just to add a little bit of adsorbent and to just filter a little bit better. Like, okay, we extract 10% more impurities. Well, we'll filter them out, and it's still exponentially cheaper than all of the drying investment that we had because of, like you said, drying and storing and processing and everything, blah, 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 blah.
Floor space, real estate.
Yeah, real estate for sure. I think the biggest issue is that's facing hemp farmers versus other farmers is that they don't have access to the credit or the funding. Normal farmer has highly subsidized ag loans that allow farmers to form co-ops to borrow a couple $1 million to set up a giant facility like that. Then it's not like because they leverage that land you know, that, or they put that land that they own and all of their equipment becomes equity against that loan. So yeah, fuck yeah, we'll give. Oh, you guys got 100,000 acres? Sure, we'll give you a couple $1 million. Why not? Like, and the government's financing half of that because it's a subsidized ag loan. Woohoo! Free bank money. Yeah. So, but because we're not allowed to borrow money because the government again has their heads deeply up their own asses, it's created this condition where it doesn't favor the farmers inadvertently. You know, it's incompetence. It's not because they it's because they just enjoy having their heads up their asses. Not because they did it because they cared about us. It's because they only care about themselves, right? It's just ignorance that this happened. They didn't plan on fucking the hemp farmers. It just happened.
Political gridlock. You know, I mean, I will say there's this slow thaw going on, right? There's some crop insurance programs that are starting to come in. That's helping. Now, technically, I don't think there's any regulations that say that the big banks couldn't give loans to a hemp farm as long as it's in compliance. Arguably, it might have to be in compliance with the new federal guidelines rather than a specific state pilot program guideline. I've seen it argued both ways. But at the end of the day, the problem is the FDA, right? You're going to go out, you're going to cultivate CBD hemp. The bank looks at it and says, well, is there a legal selling point for this?
Yeah. What are you going to do with it? What's everyone else doing with it? Can you tell me what anyone else is doing with their hemp?
Right. So there's a viability issue there. Now, so maybe the play, like you said, is build a big facility, have the facility focused on byproduct, on fiber products, on other, diversify it, right? Get it out of just being a CBD facility, and then build your CBD processing within that greater hemp co-op processing facility backbone, right? I have to say, I think it's inevitable. I think that business owners, farmers that have built co-ops before, and specifically co-op administrators coming out of these other ag sides, are going to, especially once the FDA makes a move, or people, like you said, get over the hump and start growing CBD, and not just CBD, but also seed crop, fiber crop at a larger scale.
I think seed crop right now, with existing channels of sales, is worth more than CBD. I think you can make more money per acre growing seed. Like, look how much whole hemp seeds go for at Costco. Organic ones, it's like $20 for a little 1 pound bag. That's more than people are getting for their hemp. And I bet a seeded plant puts off as much or more in weight of seeds than it would in flower. Seeds are way denser, and those things, they'll fill up. If you've never seen a fully seeded weed plant, like, they're heavy.
Yeah,
and that's good shit. That is more, if we took dried distiller grains out of our animal feed and replaced it with hemp seed, the health consequences of that would be so great to our country. The healthcare savings and just people getting more nutritious food because the animal foods that they're eating with eating nutritious food seems like a no fucking brainer.
Yeah, I mean, I eat hemp seed every morning, so I'm right there with you. And
yeah,
the truth
good
is,
for you.
Yeah, the truth is there's kind of been like a Manitoba Harvest default monopoly because of the Whole Foods hookup, but that's getting broken up. There's regional suppliers now that are starting to break into the industry supply, U.S. side, not Canada side cultivated seed. So it's happening. Last question. I think we're running out of time here. Although anybody out there in the viewership that wants to send in a question, we might be able to squeak in a couple more minutes for some Q&A there. But do you think that, say within the next 5 years, we're going to see the miracle plant where straight stalk, appropriate for long fiber production, high CBD content, but low resin production, and a high seed yield when it's a seeded plant? Because that's the thing I keep waiting for. Because at that point, you've got high quality fiber, you've got seed, and you've got CBD in the chaff that all are viable products going to market. And that's where that whole integrated facility really becomes viable. But I haven't seen any breeders out there touting that quite yet, right? Is that something you're hearing any whispers about anybody going after it?
No, really the opposite. All the big breeders are like anti-male because they're afraid of losing they all want to make money. And if people start breeding and seeds and everything, then they're going to lose money. So they're very like, oh, don't breed our plants. And so males are evil. And they're like lobbying the government to to ban the growth of male plants because it's going to seed everybody, and then nobody can grow CBD. It's like, yeah, that's kind of the fucking point, man. We need more seeds, less CBD. Like, get out of here. And oh, by the way, if that happens, the conspiracy mind in me says they don't want that to happen because all of a sudden we're going to have wild hemp everywhere, and then they really won't be able to control it. Because as soon as people start growing seeded hemp I don't know how that. I think Canada is just a little too far north for the plant to comfortably reseed. Although a couple, 10, 15 more years of growing it at crop or at scale like this. Because you look at the Midwest, we still have remnants of ditchweed from back in the day when they were growing it, because that shit is invasive. So we start growing seeded crop again, it'll spread and you're going to have weed all over. And then that becomes a regulatory nightmare for them, because once you can't kick down my door and bust me for growing weed in my closet when the empty lot or, the park across the street, the government park across the street's growing wild weed that they can't take care of. So it's like, oh, no, it just came from over there. It's in my backyard. Oh yeah. How come you guys didn't kill that weed? It's like if you got in trouble for growing blackberries in the Pacific Northwest. It's like, yeah, okay, well, come control them then for me. Sure, yeah. I'll stop growing them. You deal with it. What the fuck are you talking about? So,
it's true.
Weed will get that. They have ditchweed in the Midwest. People go out, harvest it, smoke it because it's just growing, because you can't stop it once it's going. Yeah. So
although notably it's low cannabinoid content because it's old fiber hemp.
Because it's old it's from them. But imagine one of these like modern CBD crops, and you start getting these broad scale seed projects. That's once it's out, it's out. Then yeah.
I hope the US can thaw out, because I'm just worried that internationally, China, one of the existing fiber producers, China or somewhere in Eastern Europe, they're going to push it. They're going to come out with the secret, the miracle plant that does every product in one field. And then we're going to miss the boat. That's a concern I have.
Well, and we already can't compete with with agricultural products that have long shelf life, especially non-food ag products. But like you look at like plant oil products, which are gross and people shouldn't be eating, but plant oil product, we don't compete on any of that. You could grow a fuck ton of palm trees in Florida. We don't do it. Palm oil can be grown in South America for dirt cheap because people don't give a fuck that it's on the back of slaves from land that they stole from the natives. So same thing goes for hemp. People want to industrialize this thing. It's not about permaculture. It's about how cheap can we do it. It's not about sustainable or regenerative. It's can we get slaves in Africa to grow dirt cheap hemp so that all of our consumer goods that we want will be way cheaper? Yeah, great. The one upside to COVID is that people are kind of waking up to that, and in a backwards ass racist way. But localized production is not a bad thing. But you got to be willing to pay the premium. You can't have that and also at the same time demand higher minimum wage. It's like, okay, you think the average small business owner is a billionaire? You're off your ass. It's there's a lot of these things have very marginal profits, and that's why they're scaling way up. Look at CBD, right? And it's going to the biggest automated guy can produce it cheap as fuck to make it for you. You got this weird balance between craft and cost, and I don't know. The economics of it all are very interesting and complex.
Yeah. I mean, I think we'll see a fork, right? There'll be CBD products. There'll be hemp extract, might be a small portion of the market. We'll see what regulations say, right? Is it going to be hops where there's most hops, 95% of hops that goes into Budweiser, that's just broad fields, grows internationally. And then you got your Citron and your specialty hops, that's small field, small grown, small extraction, right? Is it going to be like that? Or, maybe it'll, who knows what, I mean, the FDA is a big wild card in this whole thing, right? But the FDA is not going to come out on fiber, and it's unlikely to have any issues with the seed crop. It's already approved. It's already here. It's in the grocery store, right? So how do we work synergistically across the market? CBD is not going anywhere. It's worth building processing the right way. Specifically, if you're not GMP already, you got to get GMP, right? Because all the people that aren't GMP, well, you're going to outcompete them when you're a GMP facility because they're going out of business, right? So that's step one. But on step two, think diversification, think byproducts. How do you specialize? How do you get a niche? And biggest of all is, how do you build relationships where you can sell your end product, no matter what it is? Build your relationships, find a community, find trust, trust. Don't just build it on bottom dollar. The brokers are only here for so long until they become wholesalers. Wholesaler will give you money up front for the product, waiting for those people to show up. People taking points, it's okay because they're serving a function right now. But, in the long run, direct business to business transactions, that's where we're heading. Love to talk in the future with you about grading. I know you talked about homogenization of lots. I think maybe we could have a conversation later on about, whether we're heading towards standardized grading, standardized composition in the field, as well as on the oil side to help, transactions, loosen up the fluidity in transactions, more commodity market-like behavior. But for right now, I think we've hit the end point. Thank you so much, Dustin, for getting on. Please, all of our listeners, if you haven't checked out Future 4200 or the Good Life Gang, please do so. Really great resources. And also, you can find us at SciPhySystems.com for all your processing equipment needs. We do build to the large scale. You want to get into hexane, let's talk about it. What you want to get into propane, let's talk about it. You're on the ethanol track. We do that all day. Thanks again for everybody for joining us, and hope you have a good one. Dustin, any last words of wisdom?
Thanks for having me, and make sure you guys get high today. Take care.
All right. Thanks, everybody.